Hello again, it's your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley, back for another episode of the History of Comics podcast, this time for the fifth and final part of the history of the war comic genre. When we last left off, we had finally left World War II and moved all the way up to modern warfare. We're going to conclude this episode with those subject matter. Combat Zone was published by Marvel in 2004 by writer Karl Zindmeister and artist Dan Jurgens, initially capitalizing on the original support for the Iraq War. Zindmeister was originally a journalist embedded with the 82nd Airborne during the initial phases of the war, having written two books about his experiences in 2003, Boots on the Ground and Dawn over Baghdad. Originally intended as a 5-part miniseries, it eventually morphed into a full-on graphic novel due to numerous delays. The series had obvious right-wing leanings, with stories inspired by actual events in the war. Desert Storm Journal by Don Lomax was published through Apple Comics, where he brought his Vietnam War Journal character Scott Journal Niedermeyer out of retirement for the original 1990-91 conflict as a journalist with the 82nd Airborne as well. One of the more unique comic book tales about Iraq was Pride of Baghdad by Brian K. Vaughan and Nilo Harlechon, which was published on September 2006 through DC Vertigo, based on the true story of a group of lions who escaped the Baghdad Zoo during the initial Iraq bombings. During their journey, they would encounter other enemies from monkeys to bears, playing as metaphors for the different sets of Iraqis during the conflict. For example, the monkeys represent the looters who pillaged the wreckage. Considered a modern classic today, it was named the best comic book of 2006 by IGN. Other conflicts that inspired war comics were The Troubles, about the British occupation of Northern Ireland. The origins of the conflict reached back to the 17th century when Oliver Cromwell rampaged through the country, killing tens of thousands. This story was adapted into comic book form in Amazing High Adventures #1, written by Stephen Englehart and drawn by John Severin, where Cromwell confronts and outwits a druid. In the 1980s, Belfast was beset by numerous bombings, which was adapted into Troubled Souls by Garth Ennis, first appearing in Crisis number 15 to 20, and then issues number 22 to 27 in 1989. The story focused on a young teenager, Tom, trying to live a normal life amongst the terror despite his bigoted father and being targeted by the IRA. The story would continue with A Few Troubles More and Dix, which focused on the supporting characters Dougie and Ivor, but was played more for laughs as they are now incompetent detectives. The Bosnian War, which lasted from April 6, 1992 to December 14, 1995, mostly centered between Bosnia and Herzegovina after the breakup of Yugoslavia during the Cold War, which was also supported by Serbia and Croatia. The war was noted for numerous war crimes and ethnic cleansings, and also provided stories for war comic books, such as Safe Area Gonglad in 2000, appearing through Fantagraphics by Joe Sacco, a journalist war comic of the Bosnian War. Sacco was based in Bosnia for 4 months between the area of 1985 and 1996, basing it on interviews with half a dozen survivors after the war. The acclaimed story won the 2001 Eisner Award for Best New Graphic Novel. A sequel was produced in 2004 called The Fixer, about the return to Bosnia in 2001. Sacco would later write shorter pieces, Wars in, Profiles from Bosnia in 1995 and 1996, from Drawn and Quarterly in 2005, and Christmas with Kazakhstan, where Sacco tries to interview a Serbian leader. Other books in the conflict was Facts from Sarajevo, which was published in 1996 through Dark Horse, created by writer Irvin Rusmagic, who sent faxes to writers Martin Levick, Herman Heppen, and artist Joe Kubrick, who did and illustrated the comic book for Dark Horse. The comic chronicles Rusmagic's attempts to get his wife and children safely out of the war, thankfully ending with them escaping to Croatia. Like many of his previous war books, Kubrick once again ended the series with the tagline, Make War No More, and the war comic book veteran produced another classic, winning the Eisner for Best New Graphic Novel in 1997. Covert Wars, of course, made great fodder for comic book stories. Brought to Light, 30 Years of Drug Smuggling, Arms Deals, and Covert Action, was an anthology series that appeared in 1989 from Eclipse Comics, with stories like Shadow Play, The Secret Team, which was done by writer Alan Moore and artist Bill Savitz, highlighting the U.S. war against communism during the Cold War. Another story, Flashpoint, The Lapinka Bombings, by Joyce Broder and Tom Yeats, told the story of an alleged CIA bombing of Lapinka to kill a Nicaraguan nationalist. There is also real war stories by Eclipse about the peace activists being persecuted in El Salvador, with the U.S. Department of Defense reportedly trying to quash its publication. The Falkland Islands War, in which Argentina tried to take the Falkland Islands from Great Britain, was adapted into comic books. It is Fight for the Falklands, written by John Wagner and illustrated by Jim Watson. It began in battle by IPC from September 18, 1983 through March 19, 1983, detailing the main events of the war. The Falkland File appeared in Warlord, issue number 427 on November 27, 1982, and ran for 20 weeks, covering the battles and equipment used. Invasion appeared in battle from January 24th to August 29th of 1987, which told the true story of Tommy Baker, a schoolboy harassed by Argentinians and imprisoned, only to be freed when the British forces invade. The Tin Pot Foreign General and the Old Iron Woman also dealt with the Falkland Islands War, using the conflict as a satire over pointless war in general. Biggles recounts the Falkland Islands War by writers Bill B. Aso and J. Rideau, with artists Daniel Shavin and M. Urdurzo, with a 48-page documentary graphic novel about the war. Duel appeared in 2006 by Antarctic Press by Ted Nomura, which highlighted the air battles during the Falkland Island conflict as well. The popular but controversial Doonesbury strip also dealt with war, most notably The Long Road Home in 2005 and The War of N, along with Tea Time in Berkenstan in 2009. Much of this resulted with its longtime character BD, a Vietnam War veteran who was revealed to have lost his leg in the recent Iraq War, with The Long Road Home chronicling his recovery. While creator Gary Trudeau has long been critical of war in general, with politics being left to center, as he was with the Vietnam conflict, he maintained support for the troops, providing lists of soldiers killed along with written dispatches from those serving on the front lines. As a result, Trudeau did receive the U.S. Army's Commander's Award for Public Service, the fourth highest award the Army can bestow on a civilian, in 2006 for his strips on BD's recovery. Controversial political cartoonist Ted Rawl is no stranger to addressing modern wars. Terror Widows by Ted Rawl made the controversial claim that the widows used 9/11 for their own intention, and To Afghanistan and Back appeared in 2002, reported firsthand on the experiences in the conflict. Rawl remains no stranger to controversy when on October 22, 2007, in one of his cartoons he argued only idiots enlisted in the military service and died, resulting in the IQ back home in America going up, which resulted in outcry from both sides of the political aisle. And with us now in Fully in the Modern War, that is a surprisingly too brief and rambling history of the war comic genre. Despite the number of these episodes, this only scratches the surface of the number of war comics in the medium. As a great writer once said, war, what is it good for? Well, it appears in creating a great number of good and profound comic books. I will once again like to highlight the main source for these episodes, War Stories, a graphic history by Mike Conroy, a great comic book history of war that also inspired the format for these episodes. Pick it up wherever books are sold.
And now it is April 11th, 2019, time for the favorite comic book of the week. Symbiote Spider-Man by Peter David and Greg Lane, number 1, which finds a retro story taking place to one of the darker times in Peter Parker's Spider-Man's life when he was still wearing the symbiote black Spider-Man suit, though it hadn't quite affected his behavior yet. This is told with a separate story of Mysterio trying to score one big robbery only to see it go horribly wrong. David does a good job telling both storylines. You're seeing that Peter Parker isn't quite there yet, and he has a bit of a dark past, but he's still the Spider-Man recognized, though there's some moments of concern, even from his current girlfriend, Felicia Hardy / Black Cat, who is fun in this issue as well. Mysterio gets a nice showcase as well, as he's pretty much treated as a second-rate bad guy who one person jokes he got beat up by the Power Pack, though when he tries to get his big score, he goes horribly wrong. Greg Land's art is nicely crisp and realistic and detailed, though a little bit more cartoony this time, unlike his past work, which always looked a little too stiff and a little too realistic. Though it does make for a more serious subject matter, but overall, very good, fun issue for the most part. Looks to be a fun series. It's one of the darker times in Spider-Man's life. And with that, we will conclude this 5-part epic on the history of the war comic book genre. Join me again next week when we begin into a multi-part on the biopic of Charles Schultz, the creator of Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and his friends. Till then, go out and enjoy yourself a good comic book.